Hold on.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, we are live here. Start the recording in 3, 2, 1, record. You are listening to the 272nd edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast. I am your host, Dan Myler. It's the week 2 edition of the Dynasty podcast, and I have my good friend Chad Scott here to join me this week. We're going to talk about everything that happened in week 2 and take a look forward to week 3 and beyond as well in this week's pod. How you doing today, Chad?
I'm doing good, man. Week 2 is almost in the books, only a few games left, and I think the Denver game's pretty much out of reach. So I think we got a lot more information this week to kind of get into, and this agenda is pretty full. So let's do it.
Yeah, let's dive right in. And like we did a week ago, we are coming at you between the afternoon and evening games on Sunday. So the Packers and Falcons haven't kicked off yet. Right now, the Broncos and
Cowboys.
The Cowboys are playing so poorly that I can't even remember what they're called. Chad, they are playing right now. CJ Anderson, and we're going to go through the dynasty ups and downs of week 2. And look, like I said before, look forward to week 3 and beyond just a little bit. I think one of the biggest ups for me this week was CJ Anderson, and that game's still going. We're only halfway through the third quarter. He's already got 17 carries for 92 yards and the touchdown, an impressive touchdown, and then 3 carries for 36 yards and another touchdown. Again, we're only halfway through the third quarter. He has been impressive. Jamal Charles has only been on the field for a handful of snaps. He has 7 carries for 44 yards and a catch as well. Can we see CJ Anderson as a workhorse tailback at this point, Chad? And dare I say he's a running back 1 going forward in 2017?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I know we've hit on CJ Anderson a few times on the podcast. And as much as I like CJ Anderson, this could be a game where, if you're skeptical owner of CJ Anderson in your dynasty leagues, this might maybe be a decent time to sell to maybe a DJ owner if he's desperate. Because I mean, CJ Anderson's going to get the load. I mean, I think by far when he's on the field, he's going to be an RB1. But how long? Who knows? But this could be a perfect sell high if you've been waiting on that moment for him.
Yeah, and I hear you on that, Chad. I certainly do. But I'm a big CJ Anderson guy. I think the big question mark surrounding him has always been health. When he's on the field, he performs at least a mid to low end running back 1 and always a running back 2. Those kind of numbers for dynasty owners, I'm holding for sure. In fact, if I find him in a league where the owner is trying to sell him and sell high and the cost isn't outrageous, I'm going after him, especially on a contender for sure. Let's move on to another big winner for week 1, and that's Rob Gronkowski. He had a very Gronk game against the Saints. 6 catches, 160 yards, 1 touchdown. That touchdown that he had showed why Gronk was a top 15 dynasty asset, that he's been to that level in the past. Is he going to return to that level for dynasty owners over the next few months, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, he's still young enough, and he can still be that tier 1 above anybody else tight end for your team. I mean, hell, he dropped a second 25-yard touchdown too. That was right in his hands before leaving the game with a growing injury, apparently. So, I mean, I think the good news is it wasn't a back injury. It was a growing injury. And, that's Gronk's strongest muscle is his groin. So he should be okay for week 3.
Yeah, I certainly hope he's all right. I really feel like when I put that on the agenda, I was really having that feeling. That was before the injury even. I had that feeling that Gronk is getting back to that Gronk, that dominant player. And I know the numbers weren't necessarily there in week 1, but Kenny Vaccaro is not Eric Berry. He couldn't handle him. Those they tried to put linebackers in coverage, and that's just not going to do it against Gronk. There's not very many safeties that can man up against him. In fact, with the Eric Berry injury right now, I don't know if there's one in the league, to be honest with you, that's just that physical and that big and can keep up with Gronk and man up with them. I think we've seen it through 2 games that Gronk is going to run a lot of those very common Gronk routes. run 5 yards, run 10 yards, get physical with whoever's in coverage against him, get that little bit of separation, and then peel away, and Brady's going to find him. That's what we're going to continue to see. And there's just not a lot of guys that can cover him. So if the groin is healthy, if the rest of him is healthy, you said a big thing there, if his back is healthy, and that's the big if. I was so glad to hear it wasn't a back injury. We'll know more throughout the week, but I really feel like he's going to start moving into that second round, top 24 overall in Dynasty, and we could see him nearing that top 12 again, even if he's able to stay healthy for 16 games, which is a huge if. We talked a little bit about the Saints defense while talking about Gronk there. Man, they're bad. Is there a worse defense? And we're talking about Dynasty ups. I put it down, anybody playing the Saints defense has to be an up. Is there a worse defense in the NFL than the Saints defense, Chad?
Maybe New England's, but it's definitely not as bad as New Orleans right now. And it's like you got to be kind of salivating at your mouth when you see like your studs have a matchup against New Orleans coming up, because they're going to eat. I mean, I don't see them fixing this anytime soon. I just don't think they have the personnel or coaching to sustain anyway. So
yeah, Tom Brady went 30 for 39 for 447 yards in those 3 first half touchdowns. Of course, the Saints gave up 27 for 32 for 346 and 3 touchdowns to Bradford in week 1. Gronk went off. We already covered that. James White went 8 for 85 through the air. Hogan had 5 for 78. Diggs and Thielen went off in week 1 as well. They haven't stopped anybody yet, with the exception maybe of the guy that everybody expected to go off this week, and that's Cooks in the return to New Orleans. The Saints get the Carolina Panthers in week 3, and we're going to talk a little bit about Carolina as we go on here. Cam didn't look all that good this week. The rest of that offense has question marks surrounding them. It really feels like you should play everybody against the Saints, but are you starting your Panthers in week 3 as we look forward, Chad?
Yeah, I definitely am. In division games, they're going to get after it. We'll know how bad this defense is. If Cam does anything like that looks good, we'll know how bad New Orleans looks.
Yeah, for sure. And, it's just a big green circle or a red X, however we want to mark it on the schedule. If you got the Saints, I think you got to start your guys and expect the best. Not even hope for the best, but expect the best. Another big winner in week 3 as we go through the dynasty ups, of week 2, is Michael Crabtree. 6 catches, 80 yards, 3 touchdowns. Week 1 was an Amari Cooper game as he had the touchdown and got all those red zone looks. This week, of course, it was Michael Crabtree as he goes for the hat trick. Cooper had a PI in the end zone that set up one of Crabtree's third touchdown for Crabtree. Dynasty owners should probably expect them once again to be going back and forth. They'll have these games where 1 week it's Cooper, 1 week it's Crabtree. They kind of go back and forth. I'm not worried about Cooper at all. I expect him to still end with better numbers at the end of the year than Crabtree. But Crabtree was the guy this week. Chad, how do you feel about how things are shaking out with the Oakland receivers?
Yeah, it's kind of like you said. I mean, I thought this would be the year that Cooper finally scored more than Michael Crabtree in fantasy, and I still think that's the case. But it's going to be a week-to-week thing. I mean, it's going to be kind of a roller coaster. I think they're going to both do well week to week. Cooper didn't put up really any points today. He had like 4 for 30 or something like that. Not a big game by any chance. But again, he wasn't getting the red zone looks aside from the one where he had the PI. Crabtree is a technician in the end zone, man. I mean, this is just something we know and have to deal with if you're a Cooper owner. I mean, he's not going away anytime soon. So Amari Cooper's best weeks are still to come, though. Yeah,
they certainly are. And he still hauled in that ball and that pass interference.
Yeah.
He just couldn't drag both toes. And it was nearly a 25-yard catch for a touchdown. And Cooper owners would be pumping their fists right now. Yep. Another Cooper game. Just keep putting up those numbers, Amari. It was that close. It was inches away from salvaging the day and even making it look like a good one. So Cooper owners should not fret at all. Another winner from week 2 for dynasty owners appeared to be Javorius Buck Allen, 14 carries, 66 yards. He also reeled in 5 catches for 35 and a touchdown. Played more snaps than Terrence West in week 1. outproduce West here in week 2, who only had the 8 carries for 22 yards, but did score. Alex Collins also got involved. He had carries in week 2, going 7 for 42. Who do you want in that Baltimore offense among the running backs? It certainly looks like a mess, a three-headed monster even, perhaps. Is there a guy that you want on your team or that you're targeting, or are you selling these guys among these Baltimore running backs?
Yeah, I mean, I want to own Buck Allen, and I don't think you're necessarily going to get any kind of value for him if you're trying to sell him now. So, I mean, if you were smart enough to maybe stash him or grab him this last week on your waiver wire, you might as well ride it out until whenever Danny Woodhead gets here. Because I honestly don't think you're going to get any sort of value for him. And, I mean, he's already taken over the snaps on West. Of course, West did have the touchdown, but it's clear they want to have Buck Allen involved in both the pass and the run game, which makes him extremely valuable in fantasy for running back purposes.
Yeah, and they take on Jacksonville this coming week, and Jacksonville has been tough against the run, of course. Thus far, they didn't give up a whole lot to that Tennessee offense in week 2, and they were tough on the running game in week 1 as well. I don't know if I'm rushing to start any of these guys right away. Of course,
and
Marshall Yonda. Yep, exactly. They lost to All-Pro guard Marshall Yonda for the season. It looks like. It looks like a mess there. I don't know if I'm necessarily. Allen looked good, but I'm not necessarily rushing out to add any of these guys or start any of these guys going forward. Another running back that had a big game in week 2 is Todd Gurley. We saw it all over Twitter this past week, Chad. This is their last chance to sell Todd Gurley. I saw a lot of trades involving Gurley. Yeah. In fact, I saw one today that happened after Gurley scored his second touchdown. It's perplexing to me. Gurley looks like he is the guy. The offense is running through him out there in LA. He 16 carries, 85 yards. He did lose a fumble, but scored that touchdown and had a really nice touchdown reception where he leaped over a guy, dove for the pylon. He was impressive to me. He looked like a receiving threat. He looked like a powerful runner between the tackles. He does put his head down and just run, especially when he's at the goal line, and hope he gets across the goal line for touchdowns in those goal line situations. But man, he looked like the real deal to me. That touchdown catch, and they're playing a replay of it on TV as I watch it right now. It was impressive. He was on the field on their last chance comeback attempt late in the fourth quarter, so they trust him as a pass catcher. Are you buying into this whole sell Gurley while you can thing? Are you holding and maybe even buying him going forward? He looks like an RB1 to me.
Yeah, so this week I was really contemplating because I felt so strongly on acquiring Gurley this offseason. Just him not being tied to Jeff Fisher anymore, bringing in a younger coach with better schemes for him and the quarterback, I thought was going to be the huge difference for him. I think all he really needed was confidence. I mean, having confidence at running back is huge. He clearly had 0 last year with Jeff Fisher. That might have poured a little bit into week 1 as well. Even though he did score some points. But I think today you saw the prospect he was out of college, why everybody fell in love with him, and why he is going to be an RB1 this year. So I'm glad I did buy him where I could. Now I think owners are going to be kind of gun shy to sell him at this point.
Yeah, and if anybody's willing to sell, I'm willing to buy. So if you're in one of my leagues, certainly send him an offer. Chad's saying the same thing. Send an offer over to me because I want Gurley on my team. He looks like an RB1. If you somehow have Gurley and C.J. Anderson on the same roster, that's looking like a really good investment. And you have chances to go a long ways because those two running backs certainly looked good to me in week 2. Another running back that put up big numbers, fantasy numbers anyways, was Chris Thompson. 3 carries, 77 yards, a couple of touchdowns, also hauled in 3 catches for 29 yards. A lot of that came after Rob Kelly was hurt. He left the game in the second quarter with a rib injury against the Rams. He had 12 for 79. Samaje Perine came on, carried the mail for the Redskins late in the game, particularly 19 carries, only 63 yards. Chris Thompson, Chad, how do you feel about him? Only 6 touches in the game, but put up the big numbers. Is he a guy you're willing to start? Is he a guy you want on your roster right now?
Like if I had a best ball roster, yeah, he'd be a perfect fit in best balls. But it's like you said. I mean, he had 6 touches, and that's what we're going to see out of him: 6, 8, 10 touches a week, and 10's probably on the high side. Even if there is a Rob Kelly injury and he's out next week, that's probably on the high side. He's not a guy that you want to give a lot of touches to because you want to keep him durable and electric the way he is. He's not somebody I want to start, but I'm okay starting him as an RB2 on the big bye weeks when there's 5, 6 teams on buys.
Yeah, and let's wait and see what we hear about Kelly going forward, because that's a big piece of news that will affect what kind of touches Thompson gets. That one of those touchdowns that he scored came on a draw play on a expected pass play. It was nicely blocked. Good time to call that run for sure. And he made some plays happen when he touched the ball. I was surprised he didn't get more touches. All the news out of Washington has been Pirine is kind of in the doghouse, not expecting a lot of carries, and then the injury happens, and Pirine's the guy between the tackles. Thompson is in the passing game still. I wonder how that'll work if Rob Kelly is out for a long time. Let's keep it going with the running backs. Talk a little bit about Jay Ajayi. I watched a lot of the Miami game.
Yeah.
28 carries. Yikes. There is nobody else in Miami. We're talking about workhorse tailbacks earlier with Anderson and maybe a couple others. Carlos Hyde was another guy that was a workhorse and had a big game. Ajayi certainly looked like he fits under that workhorse title. 28 carries, 122 yards, also caught 2 passes for only 4 yards. But, man, he didn't score, so the box score is not going to look that good. Those fantasy numbers aren't off the charts. Certainly look good if you watch the game. He was powerful between the tackles, also got the edge a few times. How do you feel about Ajayi going forward, Chad?
Yeah, and it was elusive. I mean, he was getting swarmed on. He'd still find a way to break a tackle and go forward. I think the biggest thing with him, Mike Clay tweeted it out, I believe, but he played on 64 snaps. Drake was at like 4 and Damian Williams was at 2. So, I mean, that's not really sustainable, I don't think, as well. And Clay said that as well. So, I mean, I agree with him there. He's going to get his touches. 28 touches is probably going to be pretty common for what that offense wants to do with him. 25, 28, 30 touches. I think that's reasonable. And I think he's always going to be around that 100 yards when he gets those touches. We just want to see those touchdowns, and those are sure to come.
And I think that's what that offensive coaching staff in Miami wants to see. Keep the pass attempts down for Cutler, low risk throws for him. Let Ajayi run between the tackles and be that back that we saw today. That's like the ideal game script for Miami. They're not always going to be in that situation. It's not always going to be a chance to get 20-plus runs for Ajayi, but man, they had the chance today in a relatively low-scoring game. They wanted to hold on to the ball, and they were able to do that. Speaking of that passing attack in Miami, Devontae Parker was another guy that caught my eye. It was the Parker, Landry, and Ajayi show for the Miami Dolphins. Parker only had 4 catches, but it turned into 85 yards. He also nearly caught a touchdown. Looks like a big red zone threat. All that stuff that we heard in training camp and through the preseason kind of came to fruition in week 2, the Miami Dolphins' first game. Cutler showed he's willing to take the ball downfield, push it down to Parker. Landry's still the possession guy, 13 catches for 78 yards. I think he had 16 targets in the game. That was the entire passing game for the Miami Dolphins today, Chad. Who's the guy that you want? Do you want Parker, the red zone guy, the guy that's going to get the shots downfield? Or do you want Landry, the possession guy, who also got an end zone target as well in the game today? Which is the guy that you want? Who's Cutler's target that you are targeting?
If I could cop out, I'd probably just say the cheaper of the two. I want one of them. And I think I would go after whoever's cheaper. And right now, I feel like it might be Jarvis Landry, just because I don't know why people they just hate Jarvis Landry because of what he is. I mean, he continues to be a top 20 receiver every year, it seems like. So, I mean, that's his game. He's going to have running back type kind of numbers when you look at his receptions versus rush attempts, and that's just what he is. But Devontae Parker has got a lot of upside, especially with Jay Cutler throwing him the ball. So I would love if he was the cheaper one, and if he is, I will definitely be targeting him. But people love Devontae Parker. If they've held him this long, they're just like gushing over him.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm one of those guys. I want Parker if I have the choice. I always want the guy that can go off for 3 touchdowns. Everybody seems to call him Alshon Jeffrey, that he's that guy. And that's because of what Cutler said and stuff. He has a little bit of the Amari Cooper vibe for me. He feels like that guy to me and has that same kind of upside if he's able to get with a quarterback that's going to use him correctly. And I really feel like Cutler's going to do that. Fantasy owners in general, fantasy owners should love an offense that only has 2 or 3 targets and only 3 or 4 guys that are going to be the main guys in an offense. And that's what we have in Miami. I'm focusing in on those guys. Parker is going to get looks. Landry is going to get looks, and Ajayi is going to get the ball. And that's what fantasy owners should be targeting. We have some workhorses there, guys that we can count on getting targets, getting carries, and that's what we want. Those are guys I want on my team no matter what. I'm not a huge Landry guy, but if I had the chance to roster him right now because of all those targets and how he's going to be used, he's the kind of guy I want on my team for sure. Another guy that you have always wanted on your team is Martavis Bryant, Chad. Yeah. He had 3 catches in week 2, 91 yards, and had the touchdown, also had a carry for 7 yards. After 2 for 14 last week, this is a welcome stat line for Martavis Bryant owners. I have not been on the Martavis Bryant bandwagon because of off-the-field issues. I watched a lot of that football game. He was targeted downfield a couple times. The one target that he hauled in, man, did he look smooth on that catch. Also, the target in the red zone on a quick crossing pattern, slant route. That's something usually reserved for Antonio Brown. That's the route we usually see him run. I liked that we were seeing him on that underneath stuff. Only 4 official targets. Also had a pass interference, though, on a deep shot. I liked what I saw. I'm not willing to go all in on Martavis Bryant just yet, but it's certainly a step in the right direction, Chad.
Yeah, I mean, I've already gone all in on Martavis Bryant, so it was definitely a nice thing for me to see, especially after his 2 for 14 last week. Those 18 points he got mostly in like the first half, and then just they didn't really need to do that. Targeted on that long, it was probably about a 60-yarder that he had PI on. That would have been nice to get, but the 3 for 91, that's what we're gonna get with Martavis. I think he's pretty boomer bust. I don't think there's a whole lot of middle ground with Martavis Bryant. Now, he could develop to be, a solid route runner in every aspect of the game and, get peppered with, 8-10 targets a game. But he's not there yet. But, if you give him 5-6 targets, he's going to do something with them. And that's what I love about him. He's just a touchdown scoring machine when he has the opportunity.
Yeah, you mentioned it. He doesn't need a lot of targets to put up the big numbers, but you also see the downside of that in week 1 where he only had those 2 catches. So if you can live with that, he's an ultimate boomer bust guy. I certainly liked what I saw in week 2, but dynasty owners should remember that downside still exists. That 2 for 14 is still the potential that Bryant brings. For sure. A handful of other guys made big plays, and we're going to cover a few rookies. So let's leave them out for a second here. Cordero Patterson, 3 carries, 57 yards, and a touchdown. Played some tailback. That was interesting. Jermaine Kearse went 4 for 64 and had 2 scores on just 4 targets. He led the Jets in receiving and targets in week 1 when he had that 9 for 59 line. Dynasty owners should be aware of him for sure. Brandon Coleman, 4 for 82 and a touchdown on 6 targets. That box score looks a lot better than how he actually played. He had chances to make big plays on those other 2 targets and drop the ball. Not literally, but figuratively. He just doesn't have that killer instinct to go get the ball. A guy that I'm not necessarily targeting anywhere. That box score looks good. I'd be selling him, in fact, if I had him somewhere. Duke Johnson was another guy. He wasn't primarily or not exclusively anyway playing slot receiver like he did in week 1. He had 4 carries for 21 yards, 3 catches for 59. He played all over the field, nearly scored on a draw play. He has that PPR upside. I'm wondering if he's useful as an RB3 or flex play. We're going to get that clarity over the next couple weeks. Rex Burkhead, another running back that had a nice game, or at least a nice stat line, 2 carries and only 3 yards, but had those 3 receptions for 41 yards and that touchdown from Brady. He played a little slot receiver, creative play calls, as Belichick is known for. Started out of the backfield, lined up in the slot, got the mismatch, and scored over the top. Brady recognizes that stuff immediately. I'm wondering if healthy, he left the game late with an injury to his ribs as well. If he's going to be useful to fantasy owners, if Danny Amendola remains out, we're going to get a little clarity on that as we go forward. Chris Johnson, the last guy I want to mention before we get to the rookies, 11 carries, 44 yards. That's not going to pop out of the box score for dynasty owners, but he started the second half after sitting early in the game, was the preferred tailback down the stretch, certainly the most impressive tailback in that Arizona backfield. He had a couple of runs called back due to holding calls. Would have made that stat line look a lot better if he goes 13 for 73 or something like that, which is what his stat line would have looked like if those couple of runs wouldn't have been called back. Man, that would look good. He'd be added all over and probably be looking at like a RB3 going into week 3 of the NFL season. I threw out a whole handful of guys there, Chad. Is there anybody you want to comment on?
Yeah, I mean, Duke Johnson, at this point, why don't they just actually try him at running back? Isaiah Crowell looks like garbage right now, and I know he came in with a lot of hype going into the season. He hasn't had anywhere to run, granted, but I think Duke Johnson deserves more than 4 carries when Crowell's basically averaging like 2 yards per carry on his 40 some odd touches he's had so far this year. Jermaine Kearse, he's a guy that I loved picking up after he got signed by the Jets. He was free. I don't think he has any trade value, but I think he's a sneaky start that you could put in favorable matchups if you get a chance in a flex play sort of thing. Rex Burkhead, still love Sexy Rexy. Not sure if he's going to be fantasy viable week in, week out, but he'll have his weeks. And I think he was on his way to having a decent week if he wasn't getting hurt. And I think what you said about Chris Johnson was huge because he was the preferred running back when the game was on the line. I think Arians will start leaning on him a little more aside from the other 2 running backs there. But I mean, this offense is kind of a dumpster fire right now, which is weird to say about an Arizona offense.
Yeah, for sure. I going back to what you said about the Cleveland backfield, I couldn't agree more. It seems like he should be getting Duke Johnson, that is, a few more touches and definitely some carries out of the backfield. I'm just not convinced that's going to happen. They seem to be married to Crowell. That Baltimore defense, especially that front 7, is awful tough. I don't think anybody expected a big game out of Crowell this week. We'll expect better going forward. But that's a tough defense. I think that he's going to continue to get those workhorse carries, double-digit carries for sure. I'm just not convinced we're ever going to see Duke Johnson in a featured role, despite how much I'd like to see it, at least for a short period, to see what they have there. Let's check in with a few rookies this week, Chad, especially those guys we didn't get to touch on last week, because we featured the rookies in the Week 1 podcast. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, I urge you to do that for sure. Some of the rookies that had maybe not eye-popping. We saw a lot of really big games out of rookies in Week 1. We didn't necessarily see the same thing in Week 2, but we saw progress. We saw some steps forward for sure out of some of these rookies. The big one again, Kareem Hunt, after that big opening night game. He comes back after only getting 7 yards from scrimmage in the first half of that contest with the Eagles. He goes for 13, 81 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns to go along with his 3 catches for 28 yards. He backed up that big Week 1 performance with another nice game, or at least another nice second half. Andy Reid stayed committed to his rookie tailback and Hunt came up in spades in the second half of that game. I watched quite a bit of the second half there. Hunt looked good. He was tough between the tackles, stretched out the ball for a touchdown at the goal line. Savvy play there for sure. Also looked good on one of those catches that he had out of the backfield. Is he a weekly running back one now, Chad? And are you as high on him as a lot of dynasty owners are going to be looking at him as a top 12 guy going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's definitely an RB1. And hell, I mean, I'm at this point, I'm with the David Johnson injury. I don't know how I would not take him after Le'Veon Bell and Ezekiel Elliott at running back for this year anyway. We've seen his savviness. He's getting goal line work. He's a tough runner. And Philadelphia, I mean, they have one of the best top sevens in the league, or front sevens, I should say. And he looked, I mean, I kind of expected a down game from him, and it looked like that's what was going to be the case in the first half. He kept after it. What I liked is Reed kept going to him, and he just worked himself back into an RB1 for fantasy purposes this year. And this is what we're going to get, I think, all year out of him. We're not going to get the 2-3 touchdowns every week, but we're going to see him getting opportunities, and I don't see him being anything less than an RB1 at the season's end.
Yeah, and Bell has had a slow start to this season. Elliott certainly had a down game against that tough Denver defense in week 2. I'm with you. I see Hunt skyrocketing along with some of those other running backs we've talked about already in the pod. A couple other rookies that had noteworthy games for sure. Alvin Kamara only had 1 carry for 3 yards, but had 3 catches for 51 yards. In the passing game, he lined up out wide to the left and had a really nice catch on a deep ball from Drew Brees. It seems like that New Orleans coaching staff is going to be creative with Kamara. I like the way they're using him. They're just not using him enough to be a reliable fantasy asset right now, but it's coming for sure. I wish he was in a situation where he was going to be on the field a lot. That coaching staff certainly likes to play cat and mouse with us dynasty owners and fantasy owners with their running backs. I'm not sure he'll ever, at least in 2017, be that guy that you can count on every week, but there's certainly upside shown so far with Kamara. Same can be said about Juju Smith-Schuster. 3 catches, 16 yards, and a touchdown. That touchdown came on a shuffle pass. Again, they were creative with him. He was kind of playing that wing back position. When you got Le'Veon Bell in the backfield, Antonio Brown lined up wide, you're not really worried about Juju Smith-Schuster. Apparently they should be. He got another red zone target on a bubble screen, but he dropped it. He may have scored on that. It seems like Mike Tomlin really wants to get him on the field. So Juju Smith-Schuster is a rookie to watch, not necessarily startable yet, but certainly somebody to keep an eye on. Zay Jones, you could probably say the same about him. Just 2 catches, 18-yard. It doesn't look like big numbers, but he had 6 targets in the game, and he could have caught a late touchdown if Tyrod Taylor would have made it a more quality throw. I was disappointed that he couldn't come up with him. He has great hands, and that ball was behind him and way too high. He still got both hands on it. I thought Zay Jones usually catches that ball. I bet if you throw that ball 100 times, he catches it 95 times. Maybe it's rookie jitters. Maybe it's just not quite there yet, clicking with that offense that runs through Shady McCoy, and it's going to run the ball all the time. I see Zay Jones still having some big games. He's a rookie to watch for me. And then David Njoku and Jonnu Smith, tight ends that both caught their first touchdowns of their careers. Njoku went 3 for 21 in his touchdown on a 23-yard fade that he caught above his head. Nice play there. Smith caught his touchdown, 2 catches for 30 yards, caught his touchdown, 32-yard tight end screen. Athletic guy. We saw the upside from these guys. Kamara, Smith-Schuster, Jones, Njoku, Jonnu Smith. Anybody really catch your eye? Anything worth adding there, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, Gerald Everett had that long play as well. I mean, him and Jonnu Smith were kind of a couple of my favorite late-round tight ends that are targeted. Tennessee, they got those really athletic tight ends. Hell, they had Delaney Walker on a jet sweep at the goal line to score a touchdown. And then obviously the screen to Jonnu Smith. So that was nice to see him actually get on the field in week 2 and get some meaningful snaps. But yeah, Alvin Kamara, I think it's only a matter of time before they finally cut bait with Adrian Peterson. He went 8 for 26. today. Those are just wasted snaps, in my opinion. At this point, Mark Ingram had 8 for 52, so literally doubled his yards per carry. It's going to be the Kamara and Ingram show at some point, and hopefully it's sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think it is. It is sooner, and you said it, brother. With Peterson snaps, they're just wasted snaps. Everybody knows that's a running play when he's on the field, and I just don't know if he's got anything left in the tank. If nothing else, with these rookies, those guys that we mentioned there, we need to continue to preach patience. This is a work in progress with most of those guys, outside of Hunt for sure. All those guys are a work in progress. We need to see more out of these guys. It's certainly a step forward. I know 2 for 30 and a touchdown doesn't look like much, but that's something out of a rookie tight end. Same can be said for Juju Smith. Same can be said for Alvin Kamara. Patience, patience, patience. These guys are going to pay off in spades down the road. We've talked a lot about the good. Let's talk about the dynasty bad or the downers from week 2 a little bit with the last 10 or 15 minutes of the pod. Chad, let's start off with a guy who didn't even get on the field. A big down for me, coming from your favorite team, the Seattle Seahawks. Eddie Lacy was a healthy scratch with Thomas Rawls healthy. Rawls looked so much more explosive in week 2 than Lacy did in week 1. I read a couple things. Don't be surprised if Lacy is cut by the Seahawks. Don't be surprised if he's cut in your fantasy leagues either. What do you think of this whole running back situation in Seattle? I have a hard time feeling like or seeing Lacy getting cut with Rawls' injury history, Process's injury history. They're leaning on a rookie running back. What do you think of that situation in Seattle?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should have read the tea leaves. You know, you and I, we liked Eddie Lacy. I think we really actually loved Eddie Lacy coming into the season, the preseason anyway. Never really materialized. They've always been really high on Rawls. He's always been kind of their quote-unquote starter. He did start the game. Obviously looks better than Lacy already has, but I think the big thing to take away from this game is they were using Chris Carson down the end. It's kind of like that Chris Johnson scenario. They trusted him in the end. He looked the part of a Seahawk running back, 20 for 93, had some big-time runs, big-time first downs there at the end of the game to kind of seal the victory. I didn't jump on when I could have, and I'm kind of mad that I didn't because I think he's legit, especially considering, like you said, the Thomas Rawls injury history. I think it's Carson. Carson's the guy to own in Seattle. Everybody else, I'm Process is the guy, and maybe just kind of keep on. I would obviously keep, but everybody else, I think, can be kept by the wayside at this point.
Yeah, the only reason I didn't have Carson in our ups is because I wanted you to have the chance to bring him up when we talked about Lacy for sure. Carson did look good, especially down the stretch, and it shows so much that he was the guy that was being leaned on late. Rawls wasn't hurt late in this game. It was the Chris Carson show, and Pete Carroll doesn't show favorites. If a guy's hot, if he's the guy, it doesn't matter if you're a rookie in a close game that you should win by 16, but you're somehow tied in the fourth quarter. He's going with the rookie because he's the hot hand, and Carson was that guy for sure. Lacy is a mess. I don't know what to say about Rawls. Process is a guy that's intriguing for sure, but his injury history is a mess too. It's not good for those veterans in Seattle. If there's a guy to own, it's probably Carson, like as you said. Are you willing to roll him out in week 3 as an RB2 or RB3, Chris Carson?
You know, I almost did it this week just to be like, excuse my language, but batshit crazy. But I didn't. I'm glad I didn't. I think right now I'm going to say no, but I honestly think we'll get a little more clarity this week, and I think we'll know if he's named the starter. I think then wheels are up for him in your fantasy lineups.
Yeah, Carroll doesn't do that a lot. He gives a lot of that shady information. No, Rawls our veteran. He's still the guy. I expect to hear a lot of that kind of stuff going forward. I'm not sure if they're going to necessarily come in and say, yep, Carson's our man. He had those 20 carries. He looked really good down the stretch. He's a powerful guy. We want him between the tackles. He fits our offense. They don't really do that. I think there's going to be a lot of gray area here as we go forward, and I don't know if we're going to get that clarity. I think I'm willing, because of Carson's big game, 20 for 93, I'm willing to certainly walk him out there as my flex going forward. They play at Tennessee in week 3, but after that, it's Indianapolis and then back to the Rams with another tough game. The schedule doesn't necessarily say that. Offensive line certainly doesn't say starter running back, but Carson seems like the kind of guy that is going to get multiple carries going forward. I would say if there was another big loser, or I shouldn't really call him a loser. Come on, he's a great tailback. But certainly a big downer for dynasty owners. It's Jordan Howard, 9 carries, 7 rushing yards, no catches in the game against Tampa Bay. Chicago was manhandled in this game. He wasn't on the field much in the second half with the team down 3+ touchdowns. They had offensive line problems, 3 offensive guard injured, including both starters, Josh Sitton and Kyle Long. Tarek Cohen, 7 carries for 13 rushing yards, 8 receptions, 55 yards. Once again, a lot of targets. He did lose a fumble. The upcoming schedule is not good for the Chicago Bears. They play Pittsburgh at home, then to Green Bay, who had the big game in week 1 on defense. Minnesota's defense is tough. They get them at home, followed by Baltimore on the road, and then they get Carolina. That is a tough stretch for a running back. I feel like I want the pass-catching guy because Chicago's going to be playing from behind. And by that schedule, we could easily be looking at an 0-7 or 0-8 team. We can talk about Mike Glennon. We can talk about the quarterback situation, receivers. The real story here for dynasty owners is these running backs. They're the 2 best players on the Chicago offense, Chad. Which is the guy that you want in your starting lineup over this tough stretch of schedule?
Yeah, right now it's Cohen just because, I mean, it kind of has to be. Plus, Jordan Howard was seen with, his arm was in a sling. He was questionable all week. He's had the shoulder injury. I don't think the game was basically out of hand by the end of the first half, and there was no reason to put any more added damage on that shoulder. I still think Jordan Howard's the guy to own, and I think he might be my favorite go buy right now after week 3.
Yeah, and that could happen, and it could hold true for quite a while here. It could be week 4 or week 5 or week 6 that he could be a buy. Dynasty owners are going to sour if this continues, and there could be a big buying window for Jordan Howard. We're talking about a guy who is looked at by most dynasty owners as a top 20 asset, top 25 asset, top 30 asset for sure, and he just hasn't performed to that level this so far. Lots of guys thinking of him as a late round 2 startup pick. That has fallen off for sure, and we're going to see his value drop going forward. I want Cohen in my lineup if I have the choice of the 2 going forward for sure, but there is going to be a buying window, and if you're a Howard believer, you should certainly be sending out offers going forward. Another running back that has had a down start to his season, Bilal Powell. He was a popular pick as that kind of sleeper, that guy that doesn't get a whole lot of love, but will get opportunities in that New York offense. He hasn't had that so far. 6 carries, 13 yards in week 2, did not catch a pass. In week 1, it was a lot of the same, 7 carries, 22 yards, 5 catches for 17 yards. In that week 1 contest. It seems like a timeshare in New York. Bilal Powell isn't startable at this point.
No, not at all. And I wish they would just basically run Forte until he gets hurt and then get rid of this timeshare and just have it be the Bilal show. They're obviously not going to do this or do that, but right now he's not startable. I think he's a hold for now. At some point, Forte is going to get nicked up and Bilal will be the guy. It's just, I'm not in the business of predicting injuries, so I can't tell you when. It just, at some point, he's got to be the guy because we've seen this from Forte before.
Another running back that hasn't quite done what we expected him to do, DeMarco Murray, 9 carries for 25 yards, did catch a pass for 3 yards in week 2. After going 12 for 44 in week 1, there are some red flags here. Derrick Henry looked a lot better in week 2, 14 carries, 92 yards, and did have the rushing touchdown for the Titans in week 2. Should Murray owners be concerned going forward, and can we still see him as that veteran RB1 that we can plug into our lineup every week? He's certainly an RB2, at least for week 3, isn't he, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope so. It just really depends. Yeah, I know they didn't play him that much in the second half because he apparently tweaked his hamstring. So, he hasn't looked very explosive so far in 2017. He's going against Jacksonville, who has a really good defense, even though Derrick Henry looked really good against them. I mean, eventually it's going to be the Derrick Henry show, and maybe it's it. Maybe it's right now. I'm not sure. We got to see DeMarco Murray's hamstring healthy first. I don't know if he's startable going into week 3 at this point. I don't know if I can trust him.
Yeah, I can't believe we have gotten to that point. The arrow is certainly pointing down for the veteran there in Tennessee. Henry looked a heck of a lot better. Yeah. And you're right. We might be seeing it in front of our eyes. I've downgraded him for sure. He's an RB2, low end RB2, depending on this injury. If he's playing, it's hard. If you've built your team with this veteran tailback that you're counting on, it's going to be hard to take him out of your lineup altogether unless you've found some gems on the waiver wire, unless you found Tarek Cohen and some others. Certainly had some depth. It's going to be hard to move him outside of being a flex guy going forward, but that might be the case. It will unfold in front of us over the next couple of weeks. A couple of quarterbacks that were downs again, or one for sure, is Blake Bortles, 20 for 34, 223 yards. He did throw a touchdown and lost a fumble. All his production came in garbage time, and it wasn't even that great production that we got a couple of years ago when he and Allen Robinson were kind of picking on that prevent defense. He just threw a touchdown to Hearns to kind of save his day, I guess. Is he even startable in a 2-quarterback league? I don't think he's startable in Superflex, but in a 2-quarterback league, are you willing to roll Bortles as your number 2 guy?
I mean, if it's 2 QB and you have to, I mean, I guess you have to, but I almost would rather just leave an empty spot in case he goes negative.
Yeah, there's got to be a better option on your roster. I mean, I know there's those teams that are rebuilding and might have Bortles as your guy, but holy cow, it did not look good, and he does not have the weapons. You can say what you want about Hearns.
That's what sucks, yeah.
But there's nothing left in the toolbox there for him. They're going to be a running offense, and when he is throwing the ball, he's making a lot of mistakes. They played a good defense in week 2 against Tennessee, and Tennessee showed his weaknesses for sure. DeShone Kizer is another question mark for me going forward, and it's not necessarily because of his play on the field. He left the game due to a migraine. Kevin Hogan then came in, immediately drives Cleveland down the field for a touchdown, but later threw a bad interception. Kizer came back. This migraine, dynasty owners, should they be concerned about this migraine for Kizer? Every time we hear migraine in fantasy football, we think of Percy Harvin. Is that in the back of your mind with Kizer going forward?
It wasn't just and I saw that on Twitter, but I mean, I've never really heard him having one at Notre Dame, and no, my ears weren't pressed to the ground with Notre Dame news or anything, but I never really recall this ever being an issue for him before. He gave me a migraine playing against that defense today, and this is a defense Blake Bortles is going to have to go against next week. So wheels up if you still play in team defense leagues on Baltimore, but. Yeah, I mean, DeShone Kizer, it's like we said last week, this is what we're going to see at it. We're going to have ups and downs with him. He's going to make rookie mistakes. That's just what they do. And now he's probably lost Corey Coleman if it's a true broken hand. And so, what's left there? Kenny Britt looks like a shell of himself just from 2016. They got Seth DeValve and Njoku. And I guess Rashard Higgins is the new guy to own in Cleveland, getting peppered with targets.
Ugh, that does not sound good to me. Another thing that didn't sound good to me in week 2 is the Greg Olsen injury. He had one catch before going out with a broken foot. I don't think anybody is really expecting big things from Ed Dixon replacing him. Maybe a couple of those other guys, Funchess, Shepard, Samuel, maybe one of them step up, but I don't think dynasty owners should be expecting anything. What I want to know from you, Chad, as we are about out of time today, there's a couple offenses that have been sputtering to open the season here. The Arizona offense with Carson Palmer, he doesn't look very good. Didn't for the second straight week. The Panthers offense, they didn't look very good against the Buffalo defense that isn't expected to be great. these offenses going forward. The Panthers, we talked about earlier, they play New Orleans at home next week, but Cam didn't look great, didn't throw a touchdown, didn't have any turnovers either, but only threw for 228 yards and missed Christian McCaffrey on an easy touchdown pass late in the game. That passing game doesn't look great. The rushing attack isn't great in Carolina. Meanwhile, Arizona, those passing options, we expect big numbers from, but with that running game pretty much stagnant due to the David Johnson injury. It's Larry Fitzgerald with 3 for 21. J.J. Nelson had a nice game, 5 catches, 120 and a touchdown. Jaron Brown came through, 4 catches for 73 yards, but it took 11 targets. These offenses, we're expecting stuff from Arizona and Carolina. Give me some good news. Is there something to look forward to out of these offenses?
You know, I was going to say I would have said Carolina, but with this injury to Olsen, I mean, he's such a blanket for Cam, and he's such a big part of that offense. Losing him, you know, defenses on anybody they want now will probably be McCaffrey, which I know they've been doing, but they don't have this tight end weapon now. You know, that's just going to hurt the offense as a whole. You could probably move Kelvin Benjamin in there. I mean, he's as big as his tight end, so that would work. But Devin Funchess, I mean, maybe he's got a slight upgrade. I think the biggest concern for me was Cam missing that easy touchdown to McCaffrey in the end zone today. Could have walked it right in, but you know, is that something that his shoulder prevented him from doing, or is that just how Cam is? Because we've seen that in the past from him, all these overthrows that are short. So, you know, I don't know any of these offenses I can trust. I guess it'd still be the Panthers, but only just because Palmer has looked bad against the Lions and the Colts 2 weeks in a row. And if he's done, then this whole offense is done because they don't have Blaine Gabbert's not going to come in and save the day.
Yeah, that's true. And you know, you didn't mention 2 great defenses there that Palmer hasn't looked great against. Those are 2 bottom half of the league defenses. I would say maybe Detroit's right in the middle somewhere, but man, we expected big things still. One more year out of that Arizona offense, and it doesn't seem to be coming at all. As far as the Panthers, they have a nice schedule going forward. New Orleans, then New England, then Detroit. There's a chance there. I would say Cam's got to come around for sure. He's got to lead that offense. I think McCaffrey's going to become a weapon as time goes on. And I hate to say it because I'm not a Benjamin guy, but he's got to be the guy with Olsen out now that takes the step forward, gets a little bit more fantasy value, but I'm not holding my breath for it, but it seems like that's what's going to happen. As we exit week 2, looking forward to week 3, there's a few games on the docket that should be good. I'm looking forward to a lot of things in week 3 as we go forward. And maybe some of these guys that were on the down list, they move back up. Maybe those guys on the up list, they move down. But it seems to me, Chad, as an overall, it's not overreaction to week 1 anymore. Now we've seen 2 weeks of this stuff. As I look forward, I expect a lot of the same. The big ups for me so far, we've mentioned them, C.J. Anderson, some of the other running backs. I expect a lot of the same and not a lot of changes. Le'Veon Bell's been down. Elliott's been down a little bit. Are you expecting a changing of the guard among these running backs, or is it still par for the course for you?
Yeah, pretty much par for the course. I think those guys will get it going at some point, those top 2 guys. But, I mean, there is going to be some changing just because, you know, we haven't had really good young running backs come into the league for a while. So, I mean, at some point it's got to turn over to these guys, and this is a good class for it to turn over to. And so far, so good. I mean, they're getting opportunity, they're getting playing time, and they're doing something with it. So, yeah, to a certain extent, I think it is the change in the guard. I think a lot of these guys are going to be top 12 running backs come 2017. So.
Yeah, I teed it up for you, buddy, and you knocked a 300-yard drive right down the middle that time. I was hoping you'd mention those rookie running backs. It certainly seems like those rookies are going to continue to be on the way up. As we are on the way out, I want to remind you to follow the DLF Dynasty Podcast at DLF Podcast on Twitter. You should follow Chad as well at Chad_Scott13. And if you want to, you can follow me as well at DMyler22. Our buddy Matt, we wish the best to him. Yeah. He's dealing with some family issues as he goes through all of that, a passing in his family. We wish the best to him. We're thinking about him. Wish you could be here with us, buddy. Know you will soon, and we're looking forward to that day. Thanks for listening to the 272nd episode of the DLF Dynasty podcast. For my buddy Chad, I'm Dan. We'll catch you again next week. All right. The Packer game just kicked off, so we did pretty good. We went 53 minutes, but I think we covered a lot of stuff. We almost hit everything on that.
We did 53 minutes?
I have 53 on my recording.
Oh, I do? Yeah, shit.
Yeah, it didn't feel like
it. Didn't feel like 53 minutes.
Blew through that stuff, dude.
Yeah.
It was
fast. Quick. That was really fast. That was good. I'm surprised we got up to it all. Wow. Nice. Sweet.
It took me just covering a bunch of it in spurts, but I think that was.
But no, you had to. It had to be done that way. So that was good.
For sure. I appreciate you keeping some of that stuff short. I know you probably had more to say.
I know. I was just like
stuff, but you held your tongue, and I appreciate the way you did it for sure.
No problem, buddy.
Okay, dude. I'll catch you next week.
Yeah, man. Enjoy the game.
Okay, get your recording in that file for Aaron.
That's what I'm gonna do right now.
Okay, me too. Later.
All right, bud. Later.